Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lady Show English. Today we're going to explore an important topic that connects sports and the environment. We'll be looking at how major sporting events affect our climate, and along the way, we'll learn some useful vocabulary and expressions. So let's get started. Large sporting events are exciting for fans around the world, but they also have a serious environmental impact. When we talk about environmental impact, we mean the effect that human activities have on nature and our planet. The word impact here means influence or effect, and it's commonly used when discussing environmental issues. Let's look at a recent example. The 2026 World Cup will be the biggest football tournament in history. This event will take place across 3 countries, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. For the first time, 48 teams will compete instead of 32, which means there will be 104 matches instead of 64. When we say something is expanded, it means it has been made bigger or larger in size or scale. However, this expansion comes with environmental concerns. Scientists have calculated that this tournament will produce over 9 million tons of carbon dioxide. To help you understand this number, let me explain what carbon dioxide means. It's a gas that traps heat in the atmosphere and contributes to global warming. When we use the phrase carbon dioxide equivalent, we're measuring the total greenhouse gas emissions in a way that's easy to compare. Now, let's look at some important expressions from this topic. First, we have the phrase sends a dangerous message. When something sends a message, it communicates an idea or signal to others. For example, if a company continues to pollute despite making environmental promises, it sends a message that they don't really care about the environment. This phrase is useful in many contexts, not just environmental topics. Another key term is climate intensive. When we add intensive to a word, it means something requires or uses a lot of that thing. For example, labor-intensive means requiring a lot of workers, time-intensive means taking a lot of time, and carbon-intensive means producing a lot of carbon emissions. So when experts call this World Cup the most carbon-intensive event ever, they mean it will produce more carbon emissions than any similar event in history. We also see the expression damage control in the article. This phrase comes from crisis management and means trying to reduce the harm already caused by a problem. If a company makes a big mistake, they do damage control to fix their reputation. In this context, experts suggest that organizers are now just trying to minimize the environmental harm rather than prevent it. Let's examine some useful sentence patterns. The article states, it's completely misaligned with the promises they have made publicly. The word misaligned means not matching or not in agreement with. The prefix mis- means wrong or bad, so we can use it with many words, misunderstood, miscommunicated, or mismanaged. This pattern is very productive in English. Another important structure is vulnerable to. When something is vulnerable to something else, it means it's easily affected or harmed by it. For example, 14 of the 16 host cities are vulnerable to extreme heat. We can use this pattern in many situations. Children are vulnerable to peer pressure, or coastal cities are vulnerable to flooding. The phrase draw criticism from is also worth noting. When something draws criticism, it attracts negative comments or disapproval. We often follow this with from to show who is criticizing. For example, the new policy drew criticism from environmental groups. This is a formal way to say that people are complaining about something. Since we're discussing environmental issues, let's learn some related vocabulary that you'll often hear in this context. First, there's sustainability, which refers to practices that don't harm the environment and can continue for a long time. The adjective form is sustainable. For example, sustainable energy comes from sources like wind or solar power that won't run out. Speaking of energy, let's talk about renewable energy. This term refers to energy from natural sources that constantly renew themselves, such as solar power, wind power, and hydroelectric power. These are important alternatives to fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, which contribute to climate change when burned. Another useful term is carbon footprint. This expression refers to the total amount of greenhouse gases that a person, organization, or event produces. We often hear people say they want to reduce their carbon footprint, which means they want to produce less pollution. Related to this is the word emissions, which are gases or substances released into the air. When we talk about reducing emissions, we mean producing less pollution. You might also hear about extreme weather events. This phrase describes unusual and severe weather conditions like hurricanes, droughts, floods, or heat waves. Scientists say that climate change is making extreme weather events more frequent and more severe. The word extreme means very great or going far beyond normal, and it's a powerful word to emphasize how serious something is. Let's explore some common word combinations, or what we call collocations, related to this topic. In English, certain words naturally go together, and learning these combinations will make your English sound more natural and fluent. When discussing climate topics, we often use raise concerns or growing concerns. For example, the tournament size is raising concerns among scientists. This means people are becoming worried about something. Similarly, we say address concerns when we want to talk about dealing with these worries. Another common collocation is take responsibility. This phrase means accepting that you're accountable for something. In the article, a player says that organizations should take responsibility for their environmental impact. We can use this in everyday life too. You need to take responsibility for your mistakes. The expression speak out on or speak out about is also important. When someone speaks out, they publicly express their opinion, especially about something controversial or important. For example, more athletes are speaking out about climate change. This phrase suggests courage because the person might face criticism for their views. We also see shy away from in the text. When you shy away from something, you avoid it because you're nervous or afraid. The article mentions that one player does not shy away from using his platform to champion environmental issues. This means he's not afraid to talk about these topics publicly, even though it might be controversial. Since the article compares this World Cup to previous ones, let's review how to make comparisons in English. When we want to say something is more than before, we use comparative structures. For short adjectives, we add er, bigger, hotter, faster. For longer adjectives, we use more before the adjective, more dangerous, more intensive, more vulnerable. The article uses the superlative form to emphasize that this is the biggest event ever, the most carbon-intensive event ever, the biggest single sporting event. For superlatives, we use est for short adjectives, hottest, biggest, and most. 4 longer ones, most dangerous, most vulnerable. Notice that we usually use the before superlatives. We can also make comparisons using them. This tournament will produce more emissions than any previous World Cup. Another useful pattern is as for showing things are equal, it's as hot as last year. Or we can use not as to show something is less, this venue is not as hot as the others. Understanding this topic isn't just about learning English, it's about being informed about important global issues. Climate change affects sports, travel, agriculture, and daily life. When you read English news about these topics, you'll now recognize key vocabulary and phrases that will help you understand the articles better. Many of these expressions aren't limited to environmental topics. For instance, sends a message can be used when talking about fashion, politics, or business. Take responsibility applies to personal relationships, workplace situations, and many other contexts. Speak out on can refer to any issue you feel strongly about, from education to healthcare to social justice. When you encounter new English content about climate change, look for these patterns. Notice how writers use words like sustainable, emissions, and vulnerable repeatedly. Pay attention to how they structure arguments and present scientific information. This will improve not only your vocabulary but also your ability to discuss complex topics in English. That's all for today's lesson. We've learned about how major sporting events impact the environment, and we've explored many useful words and expressions you can use when discussing climate issues or reading English news. Remember, these vocabulary words and phrases appear frequently in modern English, so practicing them will really improve your fluency. Here at Lady Show English, we bring you English lessons based on real-world news about health, food, travel, business, technology, and the environment. Our goal is to help you learn English through topics that matter in your daily life and the world around us. If you enjoyed this lesson, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Thank you for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care and keep learning.